All right. How many of you read novels? Read books? Fiction and nonfiction, read devotional books. I'm not talking about just daily bread. Books. Right. Do you read a sentence and quit? Generally, no. So I have no complaints when we go through 20 verses here. Okay? Because I'm going to read 20 verses. I don't normally read that much. But in a narrative like this, it kind of is needed to get it all together here. So, it's on the screen for you to follow along, or in your Bible. I'm reading from the English Standard Version. It's from 1 Kings. We're in chapter 18, starting at verse 20. So Ahab sent to all the people of Israel and gathered the prophets together at Mount Carmel. And Elijah came near to all the people and said, "How long will you go limping between two different opinions? If the Lord is God, follow him. But if Baal, then follow him." And the people did not answer him a word. And then Elijah said to the people, even I only, am left a prophet of the Lord. But Baal's prophets are 450 men. Let two bulls be given to us, and let them choose one bull for themselves, and cut it in pieces, and lay it on the wood, but put no fire to it. And I will prepare the other bull, and lay it on the wood, and put no fire to it. And you call upon the name of your God, and I will call upon the name of the Lord, and the God who answers by fire, he is God. And all the people answered, "It is well spoken." Then Elijah said to the prophets of Baal, "Choose for yourselves one bull and prepare it first, for you are many, and call upon the name of the Lord, the name of Baal from." Wait, I lost my place here. Sorry. "Call upon the name of your God, put no fire to it." And they took the bull that was given them, and they prepared it, and called upon the name of Baal from morning until noon, saying, "O Baal, answer us." But there was no voice, and no one answered. And they limped around the altar that they had made, and at noon Elijah mocked them, saying, "Cry aloud, for he is a god. Either he is musing, or he is relieving himself, or he is on a journey, or perhaps he is asleep and must be awake." And they cried aloud and cut themselves after their customs with swords and lances, until the blood gushed out upon them. And as midday passed, they raved on until the time of the offering of the oblation. But there was no voice. No one answered. No one paid attention. Then Elijah said to all the people, "Come near to me." And all the people came near to him. And he repaired the altar of the Lord that had been thrown down. Elijah took 12 stones, according to the number of the tribes of the sons of Jacob, to whom the word of the Lord came, saying, "Israel shall be your name." And with the stones he built an altar in the name of the Lord, and he made a trench about the altar, as great as would contain 2 seahs of seed. And he put the wood in order, and cut the bull in pieces, and laid it on the wood. And he said, "Fill 4 jars with water, and pour it on the burnt offering, and on the wood." And he said, "Do it a second time." And they did it a second time. And he said, "Do it a third time." And they did it a third time. And the water ran around the altar and filled the trench also with water. And at the time of the offering of the oblation, Elijah the prophet came near and said, "O Lord, God of Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, let it be known this day that you are God in Israel, and that I am your servant, and that I have done all these things at your word. Answer me, O Lord. Answer me, that this people may know that you, O Lord, are God, and that you have turned their hearts back." And then the fire of the Lord fell and consumed the burnt offering, and the wood, and the stones, and the dust, and licked up the water that was in the trench. And when all the people saw it, they fell on their faces and said, "The Lord, he is God. The Lord, he is God." And Elijah said to them, "Seize the prophets of Baal, let not one of them escape." And they seized them. And Elijah brought them down to the brook of Kishon and slaughtered them there. Long story. Didn't make it short. But I think it's good for us to see how God worked in past and to think about how he works in the present time and how he makes us aware of who he is. A nation, the nation of Israel, had gotten lax. They saw God as kind of an alternative. They saw other options. The nation had gone downhill. Morally, spiritually, they had just fallen apart. And along comes Elijah. One day, you see, he's facing the downhill turn, and he's asking God to turn the people around. And God is using him to do that. But see, Elijah stood as opposed to Ahab. A fellow by the name of Ahab, king. He was not a good king, as kings go. In fact, he had done more evil than all the kings before him, says, just right before where we had read here. And he calls Elijah the troubler of Israel. Elijah says, no, you are the troubler. And they come into conflict, and it's like a clash. And Elijah, with all the fire and all the, they just seem as a dynamic figure. He is God's prophet. And he will not blanch, he will not step back. But he faces head on this king who is wicked to try to turn the nation around. One name. You might ask, how many people does it take to turn a nation around? I know of 12 in the New Testament. Took a whole world and turned it around. Here we see one man that stood against 450 prophets of Baal. Oh, and if you read a verse ahead, 400 of Asherah as well. So that's 950 when I add them all up. But here he faces the 450 prophets of Baal. And you see the clash of the culture. And it doesn't take far in our own culture to see the clash of culture. How many Baals do we have? How many prophets of false gods do we have in our culture today? And you wonder why we have a clash. And you see all different kinds of ideas that are put out there. Ideologies. Who comes against who? Well, here we have this, in this cultural clash, the conflict that they have here. You look at Elijah, you look at Ahab, and they are like the figureheads, if you will. Now, the prophets of Baal, of course, ate at Jezebel's table, who was Ahab's wife, and so here's the family dynasty, if you will, leading all of these false gods, the prophets of false gods. Ahab and Elijah kind of come in conflict here. And I think if you look at our own culture around us, you see personalities, leaders, that really are taking our nation to a place where there's confrontation. And we got to decide where we're going to stand. Well, the personalities here, personalities in our society, cause us, they lead us, they bring us into a place of conflict. And a lot of principles are behind this. The ideology, the false gods, they have fertility rights and the culture that agricultural dynamics, the cycle of agriculture, they're calling on their God to bring, fruit to the land. And Elijah stands on the other side and says, the real God, the creator of all, is the one that makes the fruit come to the land. And so you have these two figureheads, if you will, and the principles behind that, and the ideology behind it. And we can look at our own culture and see people like, Franklin Graham, maybe. And he'll stand and he'll say, well, let's pray for these people. Let's stand on this side. And this is the ideology that we stand for. We stand for a God and the principles behind the God. And we stand for a personage, Jesus Christ. When you think of those principles behind Christianity and Judaism and all of that, and you think of the culture that would oppose that, and there's persecution beyond, anything we've seen for quite some time in our nation. And to call a nation to come and say, oh, who are you going to follow? What ideology are you going to follow? What are the principles? See, the thing is, when Elijah comes to the people, there's this idea that you can have it both ways. You can have your cake and eat it too. I can follow Baal, and I can also follow Yahweh. No, you can't. We have to come to the place where we realize that in our culture there are some irreconcilable differences. There are some conflicts you just can't avoid. You just can't step around it and say, well, I'll just have it both ways. I'll just kind of like ride with the flow. And, this person can say that, and I can say, okay. And this person says that, and I can say, okay. Not take a stand. You really can't do that. The thing is, the conflict comes. And you can't stand for one thing and stand for God on the other side, or stand for, you got to kind of choose your sides. Because there's irreconcilable differences. There's some incompatibilities that we have to recognize. And so Elijah comes to the people and he says, call me out. Remember last week? I was calling you out last week, wasn't I? But as a nation, I think we have to listen to people like Elijah who do call us out and call us to stand for what's right. But when he calls them out, he says, how long will you go limping between two different opinions? If the Lord is God, follow him. If Baal, follow him. The people didn't answer. There's this wavering. He says they're limping about, kind of like, they really are not taking a stand either way. And so they have the options laid before him, and he says, you just have to decide. I think in our culture, the tolerance mantra has been playing for a long time. You just have to tolerate everything. And it's been playing so long that we've come to, we've heard it, and we say, okay, well, I don't want to be called a racist, so I'll, and I don't want to be called a transphobic, or I don't want to be called names, whatever the name might be. And we don't want to take a stand. We want to say, well, just kind of go with the flow. That hesitancy, that indecision to really stand for godly principles makes us weak. Makes us, bashful about our faith, and it makes us weak when it comes to our anything spiritual. We have to be people of commitment. So here they are. I love the word dithering. And the reason I like that word is because it really expresses that wishy-washy, spirituality that really doesn't take a stand. We've gotten to that church culture, I think, where we think that if we have a lot of numbers coming in, if we fill up a stadium somewhere, we are on target. Boy, aren't we good Christians. There's 450 prophets of Baal here, and they got all the people around them, and they're really whooping it up. And I think we've bought into that. And I say that because, I've been in conferences and different meetings and stuff where the church growth movement took a hold. And numbers were just, they banged every pastor would come and he'd go away feeling like a whipped dog because, numbers. Numbers aren't all of that.
That's right.
It's a myth. One man stood against 450. They had the numbers. They had the church growth movement going, and they had all the numbers there. But it's a myth. You can't just say, give me all the people, just fill the church and all that. That's not what it's all about. Now, I am all for true spiritual conversion and numbers that mean something, but numbers by themselves do not mean a hill of beans.
That's right.
So I'm here today, I guess, to expose the futility of numbers. You can have all the quantity you want and have no quality. You can be a mile wide and an inch deep. What about the drama? Well, you like the new system up here? You can hear me, right? You like the screen and all that? I'm not saying it's bad. We were at Gen Con and we were worshiping. It was good worship. But there's something wrong if you need the smoke coming up from the back and the lights and if you need all that to worship, there's something wrong. The drama here, let's just whoop it up. Let's see, what do they do here? Oh, they cried out, gashed themselves. They were just carrying on, limping up, doing their little, I don't know, I get the picture in my head. Some of you see the Native American dances around the fires and stuff like that, That's kind of the picture I get in my head. They're limping about the fire and the altar, no fire there yet because, Elijah is not on the scene yet. But, you raise a ruckus. That's not what it's all about.
That's right.
I see people raise their hands in the air. I'm not against that. I do it myself once in a while. I feel blessed and I raise my hand in the air. But it isn't about what you can show. I've seen times where I was more blessed in quiet contemplation and just weep. I didn't have to hop up and down. See, there's futility of drama. It isn't all the excitement, you get all the excitement and enthusiasm you want, and if God isn't in it, He just isn't in it.
That's right.
But what do you have? Lights, smoke, nothing. Empty. What about coercion? Now, this is a big thing. And the reason I say that is because we have this idea that we can be God. In our country, there's this idea that if we just do the right thing and say the right thing, we can make God answer our prayers. Claim it. You just got to claim it. Manipulate it. Do what it takes to make God listen to me. Then who's God? Who's God then? If you get to call the shots. See, they figure if they go long enough, we can coerce God we can make him answer. Right? If we just dance around long enough, they started out, they're starting out, they go all day, and Elijah lets them go on. And he kind of mocks them a little bit there after a while, and he just says, you guys keep it on. Maybe try long enough. Maybe you can call him back from that journey he's on. Wake him up, whatever it is. But we get the idea that we can kind of move God to do what we want. The idea here of coercion is just a myth. You can't persuade God to do something that's against His will. He has the power.
That's
You
right.
don't. The look on their faces, I imagine, after all of this time, was like, all right, we didn't make it, but maybe this one guy, give him a shot, but we couldn't do it, then he can't do it, right? He's only one. guy. And we're 450. We've been trying for hours. Look what happens when the man of God calls on the real God. Elijah, by the way, his name. We've been talking in our Sunday school a few different weeks. We were talking about the way the endings in words and the beginning in words kind of mean something. Like Samuel and Michael and the L, Daniel, those words, the L means God. And here Elijah, you know what his name means? L. My God is Yahweh. That's what his name means. My God is Yahweh. And so he stands up with his God and he prays a simple prayer. He didn't take all day to do it. He didn't get out the swords and gash and all the whoopla and hoopla. He just prayed. And as he built the altar up and did everything that could give a disadvantage to him, everything that could possibly be done to make it like fatal, to make it impossible, he did. Doused it. And God lit it on fire in his prayer. So they could see, so everybody there could see the impact. That who was God? Yahweh. My God is Yahweh, and my God answered with fire. What was the agreement? The one who answered with fire is God, right?
Right. Mm-hmm.
Guess who's God? But God didn't do it just to show off. He didn't do it to show, just to make sure he was God. You know, he didn't have to prove himself. What he did, he fulfilled his purposes, not their purposes. It wasn't Elijah's purpose, really, that he was filling here, except for the fact that Elijah's purpose was God's purpose. Funny how that works, when you side with God, you know. But look what he says. Answer me, verse 37, he says, answer me, O Lord, answer me, that this people may know that you, O Lord, are God, and that you have turned their hearts back. Mm-hmm. That's his purpose. Mm-hmm. In a prayer, in conflict, at a time when people were turned away from the Lord, non-committal, who cares really who's this God they're talking about, right? Who cares who we worship? God's plan, one man, turn their hearts back. That was his purpose here. That's always been his purpose. And it wasn't just for them either. I mean, you know, it wasn't for like to magnify himself. It wasn't like he needed their worship. But they needed to worship. Mm-hmm. The faith that he called them to was to know. First of all, to know. To know that he was God. Not all these other imaginary gods, not all these other pretender gods, not all these other whoop-la, let's just work it up and we'll imagine that God's here. But the real God, to know in their head who the real God was. Mm-hmm. But it wasn't just their head. See, it's to know, but also know this day that he is God, right? And that they would turn their hearts back. Their head and their heart.
That's right.
The two together.
Mm-hmm. Some
people think a leap of faith is just like, it's non-reasonable. You don't have to use your brain. No. There is a basis for faith. We believe because God shows us. He's demonstrated through history and time and in my own life. And we can trust him. He's shown us that. So our heads line with the truth, and our hearts are turned.
That's right.
Not just the heads, but also the hearts. Kind of like bring them together. Right? So, I guess what I'm asking today is where you're at. Are you ambivalent? You know, that person that really, so go with the flow. Not willing to make solid commitment. Who is God in your life? You have to determine that first of all. Who really is God in your life? I mean, there are a lot of people that call themselves Christians and there's like, they're worshiping everything there is out there. But when you center yourself, and there's only one God, and He truly is God, that makes all the difference. Are you truly committed, or are you wishy-washy? Does it take a lot of drumming up and enthusiasm to get you going? Or can you bow your head in prayer and worship? You try to get your way with God, or let God have His way? Those are some really things, some important things you need to think about. My desire is that we turn to Him, that we are totally committed to Him. None of this weak, dithering love. Our final hymn is number 677. I want you to look at this hymn. Jesus going to play here is, there's another song, what is it? Deep, Deep Love of Jesus, I think. It's the same tune. And the words on this hymn are kind of archaic, but I think we need to get into what it says. Once to every man and nation comes a moment to decide in the strife of truth and falsehood for the good or evil side. Who you can choose? Good or evil, right? So it might be a little archaic, but sing along. Make it in your heart. Who are you going to serve? All the things of the world. Are you really gonna choose for the one true God?
In the strife of truth and
That is strong words for us to remember today. If you can decipher it, I know it's hard. But to stand strong on the truth, even if the one on the throne stand against it. And even if you stand, let's pray. God, may we not be wavering in our faith. May we stand the truth to the point of death, Lord. May we never waver in our faith to you. May we be strong in our testimony. And whether we be in the majority